All right, good afternoon to all of you. As we were just discussing, and as you will have seen a short while ago, Mr. Abdulla Shahid of the Maldives was elected president of the 76th session of the General Assembly. In his remarks, the Secretary General congratulated Mr. Shahid and said he looks forward to working with the new president of the General Assembly. The Secretary General added that as our most representative organ, the General Assembly is the foundation of all our work at the United Nations and is essential to the effectiveness of the organization. In 2021, the world needs that effectiveness more than ever, he said, adding that the 76th session of the General Assembly will grapple with the impact of the pandemic across the three pillars of our work: peace and security, development, and of course, human rights. The Secretary General concluded by saying that Mr. Shahid's experience, including his current role as foreign minister, has given him a deep understanding of the importance of multilateralism. And turning to Syria, I can tell you that we remain very concerned about the deteriorating humanitarian situation for the 13.4 million people in need throughout the country. Some of the most vulnerable Syrians are those who are in the northwest of the country, where there are now 3.4 million people in need. More than 90% of those are assessed by the UN to be in extreme or catastrophic need, particularly 2.7 million internally displaced men, women, and children. Most of the displaced are living in over 1,000 camps and informal settlements on the Syrian-Turkish border. The only access for the UN to these millions of people is through the UN Security Council authorized cross-border operation. The Bab al-Hawa crossing is the UN's last remaining entry point for transporting assistance to northwest Syria. The assistance that is being sent by the UN team from Turkey cross-border into the northwest Syria is reaching 2.5 million Syrians on a monthly basis, with around 1,000 trucks of aid crossing the border each month. A total of 979 trucks crossed in May alone. And Bab al-Hawa, as we've just said, is the last lifeline preventing a humanitarian catastrophe for the millions of people in Syria. Despite the ongoing efforts to deliver a small number of trucks cross-line from Damascus, there remains no alternative to delivering aid at this scale and with this scope. This is why the Secretary General has said a large-scale cross-border operation for an additional 12 months remains essential to save lives. Is that some sort of an alert? Amber alert. Okay, well, those are pretty serious. Turning to Burkina Faso, you will have seen that over the weekend we issued a statement in which the Secretary General expressed his outrage at the killing of over 100 civilians, including 7 children, in an attack by unidentified assailants on a village in the Sahel region. He strongly condemned the heinous attack and underscored the urgent need for the international community to redouble support to member states in the fight against violent extremism and its unacceptable human toll. The head of the Office for West Africa and the Sahel, Mahatma Saleh Anadif, also condemned the attack and called on the government to do its utmost to apprehend and bring the perpetrators of this crime to justice. Mr. Anadif reaffirmed the UN's support to the government and people of Burkina Faso in their effort to fight terrorism and consolidate peace and development. And on the humanitarian side of the situation there, the regional health authorities, after the attack in Burkina Faso, rushed to provide care for the wounded. Partners with medical capacity operating in the area are also mobilizing support. At least 3,300 people, that's most of whom were women and children, have been displaced from the area where the attack took place and fled to other communities. Others are taking refuge in Dori, the regional capital in that area. Today in Dori, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is convening an emergency meeting on the humanitarian response. As we've mentioned, Burkina Faso is also experiencing one of the fastest growing displacement crises in the world, forcing more than 1 million people to flee their homes. The 2021 Humanitarian Response Plan for Burkina Faso requests $608 million and targeting 2.9 people is currently funded at only 16%. Also, our OCHA colleagues are organizing a member state briefing on the humanitarian situation in the Sahel as a whole this Friday, June 11th. The briefing will be moderated by Ramesh Rajasingham, the Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Deputy Emergency Coordinator. And at the Security Council, the member states this morning heard from the head of our office for the Central Africa region, that's Francois Lonseni-Fall. He told council members that the current situation in Chad has underlined the challenges facing the sub-region as they try to address the consequences of unexpected changes in the government. He reiterated the priority for the United Nations will be to support the efforts of the African Union, the Economic Community of Central African States, to accompany the transition in Chad. His office will mobilize the UN system and work with relevant partners to support inclusive dialogue aimed at ensuring a rapid transition to democratic and constitutional role in the country, but also warned that the security dynamics bordering Chad could negatively affect its internal dynamics. We, along with the international community, have, he said, should continue to engage neighboring countries in close consultations with national authorities. And turning to Sri Lanka, a quick update where our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that the latest information they've received from the country indicates that more than 271,000 people have been impacted and more than 26,000 displaced due to flash floods and landslide in the southwestern part of Sri Lanka. While no formal request for international assistance has been made, the World Food Programme in Sri Lanka has provided personal protective equipment to health safety equipment to provide personal protective equipment and health safety equipment for national first responders. The impact of the southwest monsoon comes at a time when Sri Lanka, with support of UN agencies, is working to mitigate the environmental impact of a sinking cargo ship that occurred on May 20th off the west coast near Colombo. A couple of COVID notes for you. Namibia, the UN team there says the country is experiencing a surge in COVID-19 cases. At the end of last week, there were nearly 720 cases, the highest number of confirmed cases reported in a 24-hour period since the outbreak began. Among those reported cases were students and teachers. Authorities are shutting down schools for a short period to contain the spread. In hospitals, intensive care units are at full capacity, and we are delivering oxygen concentrators. The UN team is also supporting the national vaccine rollout. We are also working to debunk myths surrounding the COVID-19 by promoting science-backed facts around the vaccine and highlighting the importance of vaccination. And Peru and Albania today received more than 710,000 doses through the Covax. Sorry, they received those last week. That brings a total... Sorry, I think that's in, let me try this again. Yes, I'm not reading the punctuation that is being prepared for me properly. Peru received more than 710,000 doses of vaccine through COVAX last week. This brings the total in the country has received from COVAX to 1.6 million since March. The resident coordinator, Igor Garafulic, said that COVAX demonstrates how an equitable global response is possible for global solidarity, stressing the UN team's full support for national vaccine campaign. For its part, Albania received AstraZeneca shipment last week. The country is set to receive 120,000 doses from COVAX in total, with a goal of reaching 20% of the population. And as of yesterday, 800,000 doses have been administered. The UN team continues to support the health response, providing help to vulnerable groups. It is also fighting misinformation, and we're helping Albania set up a lab and helping to train health workers on infection prevention and control protocols. Our team there is helping asylum seekers and migrants who have residency permits to be vaccinated. We're also working to have asylum seekers who have not yet received residency permits to be included in the vaccination plan. It's important that everyone who may be in any country receive the vaccine. And today, a new report by the United Nations and other international organizations were released, which tracks, and that report tracks progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals on energy. The latest data shows that while progress has been made, there are still 759 million people who lack access to electricity and 2.6 billion who lack access to clean cooking, to clean cooking. The report calls for the inequalities to be addressed, noting that over the last decade, the number of people without electricity in sub-Saharan Africa actually increased. The report is online, and today is World Food Safety Day. And the theme this year is Food Safety is Everyone's Business. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Health Organization stress that food safety is not only a crucial component of food security, but also plays a vital role in reducing foodborne diseases. Almost 600 million people fall sick as a result of around 200 different types of foodborne illnesses. The burden of such illnesses falls most heavily on the poor and the young. And tomorrow, we have quite a few guests. Tomorrow, I will be joined by the UNAIDS Executive Director, Winnie Byanyimia, along with the co-facilitators of the high-level meeting on HIV/AIDS. That's the permanent representative of Australia, Mitch Fifield, the permanent representative of Namibia, Neville Gertz, and they will be here to speak to you about the General Assembly's high-level meeting on HIV/AIDS, which starts tomorrow. Edie and then Celia.
The coup leader was sworn in today as president of the transitional government. Does the Secretary General have any comment? And then I have two follow-ups on Yemen.
Okay. I mean, on Mali, we've taken note of the swearing in. We very much hope that the transition will get back on track and that the timeline that was agreed to will be honored.
On Yemen, Mark Lowcock, the OCHA head, on Friday, or on Thursday and Friday, warned that people are already dying of famine in Yemen and was urging countries everywhere to step up. Has the UN had any reaction, and has there been any reaction to the Security Council meeting on the safer tanker and the threats it poses from the Houthis?
No, on the, I mean, the threat, reactions from the Houthis.
Yeah.
No reaction that I'm aware of on the Houthis, Ansar Allah front regarding us getting the right permissions and green lights to access the tanker. Every day that goes by just increases the risk of an environmental and economic and humanitarian catastrophe. On the broader humanitarian appeal, no new monies that has come in as far as I'm aware. We very much hope that all member states who have the capacity to do so will heed Mr. Lowcock's call and donate and give to the humanitarian appeal for Yemen. Celia.
Stéphane, after the attack in the village of Solan, where 160 civilians died, I have a question which might be a little naive. Why do we have lately so many attacks on villages and people being killed? Is it because the international community lack of politics, or there is, I don't know, a lack of willingness to fight the jihadists? What is the reason?
Well, I mean, listen, it's not a naive question. It's a very valid one. I mean, the answer really is multifaceted, and one could have a very interesting conversation about it. There is the issue of security, right? The need to fight insecurity through, I mean, there are a number of bilateral forces that operate in the Sahel. There's the G5 Sahel, for which the Secretary General has repeatedly called for greater support, for greater predicted financial support for those countries, because it is their country, for those people who are fighting for their people, to be supported in a way that's adequate. There are also causes that need longer term and deeper causes that need to be addressed. Climate change is one, obviously. We've talked about the clashes between the herders and the farmers. We've talked about the fight for diminishing resources. We've talked about issues of state, the presence of the state or the lack of presence of state institutions in a lot of these places. We have pushed for a coordinated approach, whether it's our special envoys for the Sahel, for countries to look at, for dealing with this in a coordinated approach. But it demands, as you say, greater support from the international community on all fronts. Tobias and then Ms. Salome.
Thanks, Steph. I've kind of a abstract question, but
Naive, abstract. This is the day. Yeah.
I have a paradoxical question.
Yeah. Christina, you better prepare yours. Yeah.
It's on the SDG energy goals and actually ties into food safety as well. But is there general guidance from a UN body on global economic supply chains, both for energy, food, different industries, but just economic reform toward addressing the climate crisis through the lens of how economic supply chains works? Where would we find UN guidance for that?
Not on the top of my head, that's for sure. We can find you through, we have a number, there are a number of UN entities and agencies that deal with. One is the Sustainable Energy for All Alliance, our colleagues in DESA as well, but we'll find you answer to your abstract question. Kristen.
A little more concrete, I think. Stéphane, an Al Jazeera journalist, was arrested over the weekend covering protests in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. Other journalists have been arrested there. In this case, she was accused of not having proper credentials and assaulting a police officer, all of which the network and she strongly denies. I'm just wondering if you're concerned about this trend, particularly in Sheikh Jarrah, but also, we saw what happened in Gaza with AP and Al Jazeera and so on. Do you have any reaction?
We're concerned. We've saw those reports. We're concerned about the trend globally. We are seeing it in so many, either in conflict zones or in places where there are demonstrations, where the authorities are blocking journalists from doing their work, which is reporting. Journalists need to be protected everywhere. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane, and thank you, Salome. You took my questions about Jabbar al-Budairi. And I want to add that her hand was broken and she was roughed up by the police. And they were then out to cry to let her, for her release, and she was released. However, we didn't hear from any of the UN officials until I don't know about. So you can correct me if there was any statement.
I was asked a question, Abdelhamid. I reacted. But did you have another question?
Yes, I do have two questions, in fact. Also, Mona al-Kurd and her brother Muhammad, who became very well known for their steadfastness in Sheikh Jarrah and their hashtag Save Sheikh Jarrah, were both arrested, and they were released also a day after, when their father was sitting in front of the Israeli court. Also, I was expecting something to come from the UN about their arrest, and I was disappointed again that the UN did not say, unless I don't know again about it, and I will apologize if there was a statement.
Well, I think on the issue of Sheikh Jarrah, I think various UN entities, notably UNRWA, has been very vocal. Mr. Lazzarini visited the area not too long ago, and we continue to follow the situation very closely.
Okay, and I have a very technical question. You said about the PGA elect Shahid, and the woman who introduced him said Shahid, and they're two different meanings. Shahid means witness, and Shahid means martyr. So I just want to be sure, how do you pronounce the last name of Abdulla, the new elected president of PGA? Shahid or Shahid?
Shahid, you're as always on these issues, you are correct, Abdelhamid. I mispronounced it. It should be Shahid, from what Fahan, in fact, told me just before walking to this room. but I'd forgotten in the few yards between my office and the podium. So thank you. Okay, Mr. Gladstone.
Hi, Steph. Thank you. Forgive me if I missed this, but has there been any update on the dues dispute between Iran and the UN? Is that we left it last week that we were pretty close to or working on a solution?
Yes, we remain. I don't want to go into details. My understanding is that we do remain close. I think every side involved in this issue is trying to resolve it. And as I mentioned earlier, there is no lack of goodwill on either the UN side or the Iranian side to try to get this in. The Iranians clearly want to pay, and we clearly want to get their money. So we're all working towards the same goal.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bulcati.
Thank you very much, Stéphane. I have just a little follow-up on this question on Iran's payment. As far as if I'm wrong, please correct me. If I understand it correctly, Iran made a payment to South Korean branch of some UN bank body or something. And can you explain what's the problem, why the money cannot reach to New York?
I don't. We're dealing with fairly complex financial transactions. I don't want to get into it at this point from here. We are trying to get the money, working with different entities and parties involved in this. Okay. Hasta mañana. Why not? Yeah.